for Community and Global Health. And we're honored to welcome Father Greg Boyle and his colleagues Larry Stewart and Jose Echeverria of Homeboy Industries, the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry program in the world. For over 30 years, Father Boyle has worked tirelessly with men and women who have been long forgotten in our society. In his most recent book, Barking to the Choir, The Power of Radical Kinship, Father Boyle writes about how compassion is transforming the lives of gang members. It draws us into stories of faith and action and challenges us to stop accepting the divisions in society as reality. Father Boyle is here with us today as a part of the Community and Global Health Seminar Series, which strives to teach students that the health of their patients and the health of communities is based not only on genetics, medications, or clinical care, but is determined by social factors and basic needs, including housing, employment, and a supported and safe neighborhood. The CCGH prepares students to address health inequity through this lens and immerse themselves in our Maywood and Chicago communities to become advocates and voices for the most vulnerable.
I'm Brian Mack, a first-year medical student in the CCGH program and Jesuit Brother Information. The successful reentry model and mission of Homeboy Industries encompasses a certain call and understanding. It is the same call and understanding that inspired a younger generation of Jesuits like myself. It is the same call and understanding that lays the foundation of Loyola University Chicago Strict School of Medicine. That all women and men are of value, worthy of opportunity, and deserving to be seen not as the other, but as our own sisters and brothers. It is important to listen, to hear, and to share the stories of all those who walk beside us. The good care of our patients requires the care of the whole person, as Ignatius coined, cura personalis. It requires compassion, it requires kinship. So please give a warm welcome to Father Greg Boyle and colleagues Jose Echeverria and Larry Stewart.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose Echeverria. I'm 36 years old, I'm sorry. You look 26, right? 36 years old. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I'm an ex-gang member, and I'm going to get a little bit about my story today. I have 5 sisters and 1 brother. I was born in Los Angeles, like I said. But growing up for me was kind of difficult because as a little kid, I never had the love from my parents that most kids have. I had an abusive father. He would come home drunk every day and pretty much beat on my mom. And if he wasn't happy with that, he would continue with me, my brothers, or my sisters. I think it was about, we were like 9 years old, 10 years old, and we finally got tired of it. And one day he came home and tried to put hands on my mom. But me and my brother had already talked about it, and we tried to defend my mom and try to take it into our own hands by trying to put hands on him. But we were just little kids. We're not going to do damage to a grown man. He pretty much beat us severely and threw us out of the house, told us never to come back. And I don't think I've ever lived with that man ever since that time. So what I did is, there was a park down the street from my house, and for a long time, that's where I was living at. Me and my brother were both 10 years old, and I got to meet a lot of people that were going through similar things, that were a little bit older than us, and they kind of guided us and helped us out going to school, buying us our clothes or whatever. I remember for a long time, I didn't want anything to do with my dad or my mom because I couldn't understand how she could still be married to this guy after what he was doing to us, you know what I mean? My biggest thing was, I remember I would talk to a lot of my friends and they wanted to hang out with us before, and I would get mad and I would get upset and I'd be like, how come you guys don't want to go home? Like, you know what we would do to give, what we would do to have what you have, like a stable home, parents and everything. And for a long time, I got arrested the first time when I was 12 years old, and it never stopped. I got arrested when I was 12 years old. I grew up in juvenile facilities. I was able to get my high school diploma through a juvenile facility, and after that, I became prison. I did 4 prison terms. Altogether, I probably did over like 18 to 20 years of my life in jail. today, what I'm able to do today, I got two daughters, a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I was able to establish a relationship with them because I had been gone for a big part of their life. I'd been in prison and they didn't want to accept me when I had got out this last time. Of course, I understand it. I never been for them. But what I did is I continued, I fought, and I continued communicating with them. And through the help of Homeboy Industries and a little bit of other people there too, I was able to get custody of my daughters. And I started building a relationship with them, and then started building a relationship with my mom and my sisters. I'm still waiting for my brother to come home because he's been down for 15 years, and I'm still waiting for him to come home so I could build that relationship with him because I haven't seen him in a long time. So growing up on the streets for me was kind of tough. I learned at a young age how to deal with dope, just to survive, just to be able to get something to eat, put in our stomachs, and the rest of it was pretty much institutions. I never really had a job besides homeboys or anything small when I was out. For a long time, I never even think I was gonna be any better or be in a position that I'm in today. Today, I'm able to pay for my rent. I'm able to provide for my kids. I'm able to be a husband. I've been married for 13 years, and I put my wife through a lot. I got a lot of damage where I have to repay with her. But I'm very fortunate that she's still there for me. You know what I mean? I've been shot quite a few times. The last time I got shot, I died twice. They brought me back, and I was in a coma. And it was through the help of a lot of people like you guys that were studying medicine that I'm able to still be alive. I'm grateful for everything that I acquired there at Homeboy Industries. The first time me walking through those doors, I didn't think I was gonna be really. I didn't even know what to expect, to be honest with you. But I know I was already tired of running the streets, being on drugs. I couldn't continue the way I was living, so I decided to. I was in jail. I decided to get clean. I came out. I'd been clean for 18 months. I went through Homeboy Industries, and the way I was treated was amazing. It was like it was like heaven on earth. I never felt the love, I never felt the realness from people, you know what I mean, wanting to help. And I've been there ever since. I've been there for a year, going on April 6th. Since April 6th, I'm sorry. I've been there for a year, and it's been a pleasure, and it's been a great opportunity. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Larry Stewart. I want to start off by saying thank you for having us here with Father Greg. And I'm going to start my story off by talking about my upbringing. I was born to my mother, who's from Chicago, Charlotte Hill. And I have three brothers, two older, one younger. And she was a single mother, raising us three. My father went to jail when I was 4 years old. I never saw him again until I went to prison when I was 20 years old. And my lifestyle was part of it was a culture, it was a way of living. I got pictures of me and my cousins and my uncles and aunties when we were kids throwing up gang signs. So if you would have came to me when I turned 11 and 12, when I started going to institutions and told me that this lifestyle was wrong, I wouldn't have believed you because this is all I knew. I didn't know what normal was until I went to prison. I started smoking PCP at the age of 13. That's a drug, a strong drug. And from there, I went into other drugs. But I followed my big brother's footsteps because I'm 40 now, he's 43. And there was no male figure in our home, just my mother going to work and me and my brothers at home doing what we wanted to do. So it started at a young age of using drugs, gang banging, running the streets. We knew to be home though before my mother made it home. So we would make it home and make like we were sorting our clothes or cleaning up, before she got there. You know how manipulative we could be when we're teenagers. So in the process of going through this transition of drugs and gang banging and trying to go to school, I was in special education since I was in elementary, so I would go to school, but I wouldn't go to class. I would run around the school because I didn't learn how to read until I started going to juvenile hall at the age of 11 by reading the Bible. And I'm thankful for that because now that I'm at Homeboys and going through all that, studying pre-college courses of history and science. I love history, it's my favorite. But looking back over my life and coming up how I came up, I didn't think I was going to live to see past the age 19. When I was barely turning 18, one of my best friends got killed and he died in my arms. And him laying there and bleeding out his mouth and his body going through convulsions, it did something to me mentally, and I didn't know what it did at that time and moment. But shortly after that, I went to prison for a long time, for 20 years, and I've been out now for going on 7 months. And I'm here standing before y'all today by the grace of Homeboy Industries, and never having a job, never being in school. I love all these new things because I started off at Homeboy Industries just walking in. I heard about it in prison, about how if you go to Homeboy Industries, they'll give you a job. And I love receiving a paycheck. So I went there and I met Father Greg. I met the family at Homeboy Industries. It's like I walked through the door and in the morning they have a morning meeting where we said prayer, we do a thought of the day. And when I walked in, the vibration and the energy there, I can't really explain it. You got to go visit and see yourself, because it's like, you could feel it in the air. And people hugged me, and I bumped into one dude named Miguel. You know, when you bump into somebody, you turn around and expect them to say, excuse me, or sorry. He turned around and gave me a hug. So it threw me back. This is what, I'm like, is this real or is this an act? Because we all gang members coming from different areas, and coming from these different areas, you see this guy, you know, a couple of years ago you was shooting at him, and now you hugging him. And I'm like, okay, I got to see if this really real. So I came back and I had an interview with Father Greg, and he said, he made me laugh. He said, so what are you here for? I said, well, I'm an ex-gang member. I just got out of prison. I'm trying to change my life. He said, can you pass the drug test? I'm like, yeah, I can pass. He said, well, if you can, I can send you to rehab to get help, and you come back and work. I'm like, no, I can pass it. He said, all right, you hired. I'm like, he gave me a handshake, and then he pulled me in and gave me a hug, and I was like, I didn't know what to expect. So I'm like, okay, this is real. This is real. And I left out, and people just walking by and talking to me. So the programs that got there, I started off like working as a janitor, never having a job, but I cleaning the bathrooms, cleaning the toilets, and you know, it was, okay, this is cool. I've been doing this all my life. And then I moved to the kitchen, and I was working cleaning over there. Then I went to preparing food. Then I moved to the bakery. So it's teaching me how to be in an environment and work, and good work ethics. From never having a job, now being 40 years old, I love it. And I get a check every 2 weeks, and it's like, man, I get to spend this money, but I got to spend it wisely because it costs. And I love it. And my life has been a struggle, but I know it's been a beautiful struggle as I look back over it. I see in every painful and broken situation that I've been in, it's come out beautiful in the end. And it's a lot, but really, when you look at it in all, it's really not a lot. It's just bearing what's on you and sharing it. And I'm here to thank y'all for hearing me today, and hope it helps someone.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you, Larry and Jose. You know, they were saying that this is the coldest they've ever been. So I would ask you to invite them to come back in January so you can introduce them to what cold is. It's the privilege of my life for 33 years to have worked with gang members and to know folks like Larry and Jose. And the day won't ever come when I am more noble or have more courage or I'm closer to God than these two. And the thousands who have walked and I've been privileged to know over all these years. Somebody like Luis Perez, who years ago used to run the place, a gang member, former heroin addict, kind of shot caller in his gang. And and a good speaker. And he would speak at a lot of things, and then pretty soon he was in demand. They would ask him to come to things. And he and I went out to dinner, and he was giving me tips on how to speak publicly. And he said, you know, you gotta pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. I said, yeah, no shit. Some good advice there. So, you know, you're gathered in this room because you have a vision. You know, you're connected to this school and to the Jesuit tradition because you want the world to look differently than it currently looks, and we all want that. We all want to imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. You are training yourself so that on some level with a specificity you want to dismantle the barriers that exclude, not just get people well. So you also want to inch your way out to the margins because the only way for them to get erased is if you stand at them. And you stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, and you stand with those whose dignity has been denied, and you stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And every once in a while you land on this exquisite privilege to be able to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. You get to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And you stand at the margins because you want to imagine something new and different. Namely, I think, a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it. And if kinship happened to be our goal, I suspect that we would no longer be promoting justice, we'd be celebrating it. And so you stand at the margins and you brace yourselves because people will accuse you of wasting your time. That's how it works. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, in this place in which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. And so what you do by going to the margins in your way, in your particularity, other voices get heard. You don't go to the margins to make a difference. You go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different. And then everybody inhabits their own nobility and their own dignity. Long lay the world in sin and error, pining till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. Yeah, it's a song about Christmas, and it's a song about Jesus. But how is it not the job description of everybody in this room? You appear, and the soul feels its worth. All of us are called to be enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. At home, we were allergic to the notion of holding the bar up and asking homies to measure up. We don't do that. We don't believe in it. Instead, we hold the mirror up and tell people the truth, knowing that your truth is my truth, and my truth is a gang member's truth. It's all the same truth. Here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch folks become that truth. You watch folks inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's huge. So I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city, Dolores Mission Church, nestled in the middle of 2 public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village, largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other, which is unheard of in public housing to have that many gangs, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in LA and consequently in the world. This was my parish. I didn't know this when I drove up. So I buried my first young person killed because of the sadness in 1988 and buried my 227th some 3 months ago. Not all from that community, but I run a large gang intervention program. I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school for middle school, junior high age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. And so they were wreaking havoc in the middle of the day, violent, selling drugs, and writing on the wall. So I walked out to them and I'd kind of isolate one at a time. I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, they all said, yeah, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand. So across the street from the church was our elementary school, our parochial school, grades K to 8, which occupied the first 2 floors. But then the entire 3rd floor was a convent, and where these 6 Belgian nuns lived. And so I gathered them in the living room, and I sat them down, and I said, hey, would you guys mind moving out, and we can turn the convent into a school for gang members? And they looked at each other, they said, sure. And honest to God, that was the entirety of their discernment process. So that brought a lot of gang members to church property, which created something of a disconnect. People in the parish, parishioners start to say, hey, well, wait a minute. Aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed? Good people in, bad people out, which was a good gospel challenge. So, and that was good. That disconnect was a good thing. And then a gang member said if only we had jobs, and then myself and the women in the parish, we marched around the housing projects trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. And so we invented things like maintenance crew, landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of rivals from the 8 gangs, which created another disconnect, because then your homies would say, how can you work with that guy, which was all a good thing. So, and then in 1992, we had the unrest in Los Angeles following the Rodney King verdict, and every pocket of poverty ignited, except a predictable place, which was my parish. It didn't at all. And so the LA Times snooped around and wanted to know why that was, and of course they asked me, so I said, well, I think it's because we had 60 strategically hired rival gang members working side by side with each other in different ventures, and they had a reason to get up and a reason not to gangbang the night before, and more to the point of your question, a reason not to torch their own community. And so the article appeared, and a movie producer named Ray Stark read the article, and he happened to have $500 million. So he summoned me, and he said, how should I spend my money? And when I look back on it now, I was young. I see now that I woefully undershot my request. So I said, well, I don't know. There's an abandoned bakery across the street from the school. It's got ovens. We could clean them up and make them work again and paint the place. We could put hairnets on rival enemy gang members. I don't know. We could call it Homeboy Bakery. They could bake bread. And he said, sure. And so we were off and running. And a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we changed our name from Jobs for a Future to Homeboy Industries. Not everything worked. I'll be the first to admit it. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. Did not see that coming. But it's important to kind of underscore the times, So the first 10 years of Homeboy Industries was marked by death threats, bomb threats, and hate mail. Never from gang members, but the demonizing was so wholesale and broad that, it was a short hop to demonize somebody who was helping gang members. The friend of our enemy is our enemy. So that's what happened. And I braced myself for, those old answering machines. You rewind them in the morning and listen, and horrifying stuff. And a lot of the anonymous hate mail really was from anonymous police officers. I'm a sheriff, I'm a cop, I'm LAPD. I hate you, you're part of the problem. Hard to retrieve that now, but that was really part of the culture 30 years ago. So I'd write an op-ed piece in the LA Times, and then, you'd brace yourself for a backlash. And so the bakery operated until October of '99, when it burnt to the ground. And so prior to that, I had just written an op-ed piece, so I thought, yikes, maybe this is, arson. And, but we were able to determine within an hour of the fire that it was natural causes that had ignited in some wiring in the walls. But we all kind of suspected that, so arson at first. And I remember I was walking quickly from my house to the bakery, and flames were roaring through the roof, and a homegirl named Lucero hugged me, and she was sobbing, and she said, "Don't worry, G, tomorrow we'll have a car wash." Which I would certainly put us over the top. And the senoras in the projects promised to have a venta de comida where they would sell food. And there was an old Irish-looking fire inspector, and he came up to me, "Hey, I hear you're the owner." I said, "Yeah, I guess I'm the owner. And do you have any reason to believe why somebody might have set this fire?" I said, "No." "You didn't have any disgruntled ex-employees, did you?" I said, "No, I think we're okay there, because only the disgruntled ones still work for me." He didn't laugh, but then he confides in me. He said, "You know this area where the bakery's located?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." "It's known for hoodlums," he says to me. Like this news might come as a surprise to me. And I said, "I think we're good there too, because we only hire hoodlums." So, again, no laugh. But, so, we were able to call all the workers, all enemies, all rivals who worked side by side, except we couldn't find Danny. And Danny appears in the morning. He steps off the bus nearby. His uniform is planchada, and it says Homeboy Bakery here, and Danny emblazoned over here, and his step is light as he walks into the bakery parking lot. And then it dawns on him. He plants his feet. He sees the smoke still wafting through the roof. He sees his co-workers, rivals, picking through the soggy mess that the firefighters have pulled out. And he knows now what this is. And so he holds his face in his hands and he just sobs, because this was a whole lot more than a job. It was, in fact, his reason to get up every day. And the bond that he enjoyed with his co-workers, all enemies, was deeper than anything he had ever known in his gang or in his family. So we promised to rebuild as we surrounded him with hugs. And we're thriving today as a bakery. But the importance of Homeboy Bakery on the scene at that moment in history was significant, because Homeboy was an exit ramp off a crazy violent freeway. And prior to that, you have to understand there was no exit ramp. In LA, we talk freeways, and there was no exit ramp. So what did that do to the gang member who could not see or imagine a way out of this? It intensified his despair, which increased the violence. So there are only 3 profiles of kids who join gangs. There aren't 8, there aren't 5, there are only 3. There's the despondent kid who can't imagine tomorrow. And if you can't imagine tomorrow, your present doesn't compel you. And if your present doesn't compel you, you won't care whether you inflict harm or duck to get out of harm's way. It's about a lethal absence of hope. The second profile of the kid who joins the gang is a damaged, traumatized kid. Unspeakable things have been done to that kid. I would not have survived a single day in the childhoods of the two of you. And the traumatized kid who is at the moment unable to transform his pain, so he keeps inflicting it. And the third profile of the kid is the mentally ill kid. That's it. There are no other profiles. Not the excitement seeker or the kid who wants to belong. Nope. Those are the three profiles. If we knew that to be the truth, and I bet my life on it, then what would we do? As a community, we'd infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign. We'd help heal the damaged and traumatized. We'd deliver mental health services in a timely and culturally appropriate way. It's on a continuum of severity, so some kids are more despondent than mentally ill, and some are more traumatized than despondent. But that's what you do. No kid is seeking anything when he joins a gang. He's fleeing something. No exceptions. I've never met an exception. Gangs are the places kids go when they've encountered their life as a misery, and who doesn't know by now that misery loves company? Nobody knows better than all of you that there is no good treatment plan that's ever been born of a bad diagnosis. So if the diagnosis sucks, I have no idea how do you arrive at a good treatment plan. So that's why it's essential that we get the diagnosis right. Once I was in a big city in this country, and the chief of police was handing me a brochure that you give to parents, telltale signs that your kid is gravitating perilously close to a gang kind of thing. And then you open it and it said, the #1 reason why kids join gangs, and it had a big fat word in block letters, excitement. Now, if you were to ask me 200 reasons why a kid joins a gang, excitement wouldn't appear on my list. But that's the outsider view driving the inside of how we see this, which is precisely a problem. And that's a bad diagnosis, because if you think a kid is joining a gang because he's an excitement seeker, then that colors your strategy, no matter how sure-footed it is in its wrong-headedness. So the bakery appeared on the scene, and it was famous, and the news people would come, and busloads of Japanese tourists take us to your bakery, and Prince Charles and his business advisor. So it was kind of a big deal because it was an exit ramp. Gang members started to imagine, maybe I could step away from this. And maybe I could heal, which is what the two of them have experienced at Homeboy. A way to transform the pain, to go right through it, and come out the other side resilient, and the soul feels its worth. So there was a homie named Roman, who was the biggest drug dealer I ever knew from a gang, and a very smart kid, but always resisted my efforts to hire him, until one day he didn't. And it had to do, I think, with the birth of his daughter, Clarissa. It takes what it takes in recovery. And so he started to bake bread, but he was a natural leader in his gang, and so I named him the foreman. And not only did he work with enemies, he had to supervise them, which is a great deal more difficult. And but the part he hated was greeting people who came in. And it's important to announce a message. And this is why I always said yes to any tour group or anything, any news crew. What if we were to invest in people rather than mindlessly incarcerating or trying to incarcerate our way out of stuff? So one day he and I were waiting out in front, and a big busload of farmers from Central California were going to come, and they wanted to see the famous Homeboy Bakery, and before it burned down. And so they came, and I'm waiting with him. He's having a bad attitude day. I'm saying, get over it. And the bus comes in. Hi, how are you? So, just park right there. And it's a big, huge, sleek, ultra-modern bus, and has the microphone sees the microphone and he pretends he's the tour guide. Thank you for visiting. Welcome to Homeboy Bakery. Observe gang members in their natural habitat. Please keep your hands in the bus at all times. Do not attempt to feed the homies. They are not yet tame. I said, cállate, cabrón. And so I leave them with him, and I go back to my office a couple blocks away. And when I came back, I see him, and it triggers the memory. Oh, there was a tour. Hey, Doc, how was that tour? You go, damn, gee, what's up with white people anyway? I said, I have no idea what is up with us. He said, well, they always be using the word great. And I go, Samuel? He goes, yeah, watch, I checked this out. This busload of gabachos came in here, and they see the bakery, and it's all shiny, and the ovens and the machines, and this place is great. And they see the homies knowing their enemies and rivals, and you fellas are great. And they taste the bread, and they say, wow, this bread, it's great. How come white people always be using the word great? I said, I have no idea. And this is the first I've heard of this. And trust me, from that moment forward, every opportunity I could find, I told him how great he was. Just to mess with him. And well, cut to like 6 months later, and those days, I can't believe I did it then, but because it's past my bedtime. But I'd show up at 11 every night, which is when they closed. And so I pull into the parking lot, and Roman sees me, rushes me at my car, which he never is excited about anything. And I get out of the car and goes, gee, you're not going to believe what happened yesterday. Well, he tells me that after his shift, he goes to pick up his 4-year-old daughter, Clarissa, at the babysitter's, and puts her in the car and drives to his apartment, where for the first time in his life, he's paying rent with honestly earned, clean, decent money. He unlocks the front door, and Clarissa goes running down this little hall, and she lands in the sala in the living room. She plants her feet, and she extends her arms, and she takes the whole room in with her gaze, and she says, "This is great." And he said, "I thought she was turning white on me." And he gets down at eye level and he says, "Miko, what's great?" And little Clarissa clutches her chest with great emotion, and she says, "My home." And as soon as he says it, instantly the two of us, we just stare at each other, and our eyes well up with tears, and we watch as both our eyes produce tears, and they roll down our cheeks, and we just stare at each other for what seemed to be an eternity. And then I finally broke the silence. I said, "You did this. You've never had a home in your life, and now you have one. You did this. You used to be the biggest drug dealer in town, and you stopped and you baked bread instead. You did this. You've never had a father in your life, and now you are one. And I hate to have to tell you, but you're great." And I hate to have to tell you, and the first time I ever told that story, I retrieved it from my memory bank and told it at his funeral some 3-4 months later. He was packing the trunk of his car for a camping trip, and two guys came in like wearing ski masks. And they saw him, and they must have said, "Oh, he'll do." Guys who hadn't transformed their pain yet, guys stuck in the lethal absence of hope, or guys who were mentally ill gunned him down. But his homies and his friends kept saying, "What's the point of doing good if that can happen to you?" I thought it was a good question, so it deserved an answer. So I said in front of this packed church, I said before he left us, he was able to know the truth of who he was. that he was exactly what God had in mind when God made him. And then he became that truth. He inhabited that truth, and the soul felt its worth. No bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's huge. We want to get this right. The diagnosis, that is. We're in an age when we want to address things head on. My alma mater has just started a class called Hate, because they want to address hate head on. And I go, yeah, how's that going to work for you? Because I think if you want to address hate, you have to address health. Like 19th century medical history, when the whole medical profession was staring at all these vexing diseases, and they applied everything they knew to apply because they wanted to address this head on. Hospitals, doctors, nurses, medicine, nothing worked. But then when they addressed the sewer system and the water supply, what happened to the diseases? They disappeared. Why? Because the diseases were about something else. And this is the thing that I think is so vexing for us, because we're self-congratulatory by nature. And we want to say, we're going to address gang violence head on in Chicago. We're going to address head on white supremacists, racism, hatred. And all of those things are about something else. And the trick is to find the something else. The trick is to get underneath it. What language is violence speaking? And that's important. No kinship, no peace, no kinship, no justice, no kinship, no equality. All those things that we long for are byproducts of the truth that we belong to each other. I'll just end with this story then. I remember there was a homie who named Bandit, and he was well named, and he was gang member in Aliso Village projects. He would ride his bike up to cars and sell crack cocaine. I'd be on my bike in the middle of the night. I'd see him there. He was never really all that completely embarrassed that I would see him there. And he also would say no when I'd invite him to have a life. But no amount of me wanting him to have a life was ever the same as him wanting to have one. Until one day he walked into our place. And I said, wow, I can't believe you're here. And he said, I'm tired of being tired. So he surrendered to the healing of the place. Homeboy used to say, nothing stops a bullet like a job. And then we realized that an employed gang member may or may not return to prison, or an educated one may or may not. But we have this absolute conviction now, after 31 years, that a healed gang member will not ever reoffend. So he surrendered to it. And he did therapy, and he removed tattoos. And he transformed his pain so he could stop inflicting it. And then we found him a better job after his 18 months with us, and he house, wife, kids. It was an entry-level job at some warehouse, and then cut to 5 years later, he's the supervisor, and Meadow Chingona, the whole damn place, And so I hadn't heard from him in a long time, and no news is good news with homies, and so he calls me late on a Friday, and there's kind of panic in his voice. He says, gee, you gotta bless my daughter. ¿Qué pasó, mijo? Is she sick? Is she in the hospital? What's happened? Oh, no, on Sunday she's going to Humboldt College. Imagine my oldest, my Jessica. She's going to college, but Humboldt's way up north, and she's a little chaparrita, and we're afraid for her. So could you give her a blessing before she goes? I go, are you kidding? I'd be honored to do it. So I have a baptism tomorrow at 1. Why don't you come at 12:30? We'll do a little send-off. So right at 12:30 the next day, Bandit and his wife and the 3 kids, including tiny little Jessica, are there. And I said, well, let's stand in front of the altar and let's put her in the middle and encircle her, and everybody touch her. Put your hands on her shoulder, on her head, on her shoulders. And I tell them to close their eyes, and we bow our heads, and as the homies would say, I do a long-ass prayer. I go somewhere in the middle of it, I notice we've all become chillones, And I don't know why we're all crying, except for the fact that Bandit and his wife do not know anybody who's ever gone to college, except me, certainly their families. So, finish the prayer, we're kind of wiping our eyes and laughing at how mushy we got. And so to change the subject, I look at little Jessica, hey, what are you going to study at Humboldt College? And she was very quick, forensic psychology. And I go, damn, forensic psychology. And Bandit chimes in, he says, yeah, she wants to study the criminal mind. And Jessica looks deadpan and she does one of these. And he sees her and he laughs. He goes, yep, I'm going to be her first subject. So we go out to the car and big abrazos, everybody piles in the car, but he hangs back. I'm glad he has. And I said, hey, can I tell you something? I give you credit for the man you've chosen to become, for choosing to walk in your own footsteps. I'm proud of you. And his eyes well up with tears, and he says, "Sabes qué? I'm proud of myself. All my life, people called me a lowlife, a bueno para nada, good for nothing. I guess I showed him." I said, "Yeah, I guess you did." And the soul feels its worth. Exactly right. And so we go to the margins and we cease to care if anyone accuses us of wasting our time. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. We don't go to the margins to make a difference. We go there so that the folks at the margins make us different. Thank you very much. Question and answer. So real fast, real informal, go like this, and one or the three of us, I'll make sure one of the three of us answer the question. Just ask anything. Yes, way back there. Yeah. So the question is about the model. So we have a thing called the Global Homeboy Network, and it's been around since 2008. When we started to get asked by, Wichita, Kansas to airlift Homeboy into Wichita, we said, do we really want to become the McDonald's of gang intervention program? Franchises with over 5 billion gang members served. So we decided not to do that, so we offer technical assistance. So I don't know how many tour groups we have every week, but every day, from all over, stakeholders from all over the country and the world. So now we have 146 programs modeled on Homeboy in the United States and 16 outside the country. So we gather every August for 2.5 days. I would invite you if you have any interest of starting something. So partners come, but also folks who want to explore starting something. So it's a model, so you have Rise Up Industries and San Diego and Braveheart Industries and Glasgow, Scotland. And they're all kind of the same methodology and strategies and the power of tenderness and the secret sauce, which is what the two of them talked about, which is communities of tenderness that receive you. That's kind of disarming and enable you to receive services ultimately. So, yes, sir.
What is the next one that you're having, like the convention?
It's always in August. Go to our website, look for Global Homeboy Network. As a matter of fact, they just announced that they're taking, because it sells out real fast. People come, because it's kind of a love fest, you know. We have a lot of issues that, and then people are concrete things, you know. How do you start a social enterprise? How do you fund stuff? Our therapy is kind of an interesting model, so people like the mental health piece. We have 4 paid therapists, but 47 volunteer therapists, including 2 psychiatrists. So there's a methodology to that this population is amenable to, you know, which wasn't true in my first 10 years. But now, for the first time ever in 31 years, we have a waiting list. It's hard to get enough therapists, even with that number of, you know, nearly 50 therapists. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, when I was in LAX a couple years ago, I saw a restaurant, Homeboy. Is that you guys?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a branding situation because it's called Homeboy Cafe, and we get some of our product in there. But you know, people will walk up and to the people behind the counter, and oh, we're so proud of you. Good for you. And in the early days, they were dumb enough to say, well, I'm not a gang member. Well, good, I'll buy my coffee elsewhere. I was stupid. And it's because these guys can't go there to work. And none of our folks can because they can fly, which we just did. But they can't work past the TSA. So it's a branding thing. It brings us money, but... and the message is there in the story of Homeboy. So, yes, way back there.
You mentioned earlier in your speech that there can be tensions between local law enforcement and ex-gang members. How have you partnered with local law enforcement or helped maybe build the trust between the two communities?
Yeah, the question is about the relationship with law enforcement, and that's kind of ancient history on the one hand, that there was hostility, you know, since the demonizing was so writ large. But, so not that much of an issue now, especially from the higher ups, you know, are into relational policing and have a different mode. However, you know, the rank and file sometimes have a hard time. So if their motto is get the bad guy, well, these are the bad guys, and once a gang member, always a gang member, which is not a healthy nor accurate way to see things. So people presume we partner with them because they presume that gangs are a law enforcement issue. But it isn't. It's not really a crime issue at all. It's a community health issue. So law enforcement plays a role, but not as important as they think. So then it becomes, you know, unhealthy communities and cities have law enforcement say, step aside, let us handle this gang problem. Watch how that turns out. But the fewer stakeholders, the less healthy. So the more it is rarefied and narrow, you know, like hardcore gang intervention workers and even violence interrupters and step aside. Anybody who says step aside, let us handle this is a sign of unhealth. But the minute it's broad and spacious and expansive and all hands on deck, and there isn't anybody in the community who can't be a beneficial presence to this issue, that's health, and that's what you want. Next questions I'm going to throw to these two gentlemen. Yes?
I guess one question would be, what brought you to Chicago, and how do you think you can help Chicago?
I don't presume to ever help anybody, you know. I just, I know what we do, and to the extent that people, but we get invited, so we have like 6 gigs here. But, you know, we didn't invite ourselves, you know. happy to help and whatever. I know tomorrow night we're having a big, huge kind of forum thing. On the one hand, Chicago is not, LA is not Chicago, but on the other hand, I think Homeboy has been around a long time, and I think we've learned a lot of lessons, and we've changed from how we see things, you know. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything that you wish that the people you had encountered before entering Homeboy's industry would have done, or said, or been to you to help you make that transition sooner?
Who are you talking about, gang members? Or?
I'm specifically talking to Jose and Larry in this, where is there anything you wish something?
Oh, them.
Yeah.
What would have helped you when you were growing up?
Well, for me, since I started getting incarcerated at 11, all the way up till I went to prison when I was 20. I went on a run when I was 18 for 19 months. What would have helped me getting out of juvenile facilities is what I'm going to do now, is just do what Father G's been doing. Being there. When I got out, if I'd have had somebody just to be there and say, come on, walk with me, talk with me, tell me what's going on with you, just being present, that would have been more than enough. And now, what's helped me is this right here. And I know being a model of what he's doing is being there with no judgment and opening my arms to the youth. That's key. So that's what's going to help me now, and that's what's going to help the future.
What would have helped?
For me, what would have helped me when I was younger, I think, like looking back at my childhood and everything, probably growing up with better parenting, with a dad or a mom, because I mean, I did have a dad or a mom, but I didn't at the same time. You know what I mean? I was pretty much raised on the streets and left to be raised on my own, me and my brother. So now I think about my daughters and how much time I've been away from them, and how much I hated my dad growing up, and I was just becoming the same thing that he had done to us. You know what I mean? So I mean, I think what would have helped me would have been a healthier home environment. So I wouldn't have to be running away from my home, from my house, or be on the streets gang banging, or even having to sell dope just to eat. You know what I mean? I think that would have helped me a lot. And I mean. And then just the fact that I walking in through the doors at Homeboy Industries, I was able to get the proper therapy, to talk to the right people and everything, and I was able to process all that. So I got a little bit of understanding about how, you know what I mean, how I changed. It's a big difference. It's a way big difference the way I could have grown up than the way I had to grow up. You know what I mean?
Anyway, thank you all very much, because we've run out of time, so.